It's quite a challenge to have to speak after Thabile, because I've been in the same room as her delivering a presentation. It's quite a tall order. When you guys kept throwing questions, I was hoping those questions would continue to a point that Denver would then say, we've gone beyond the time that Sikuthali was going to speak. But clearly, I am not that lucky. So my topic talks to the risks within the higher education sector. As I reflected on it, and as I also looked at what Thabile is delivering, my view was that maybe I should just talk ERM broadly within the higher education sector rather than specific risks. However, before I get to that point, I would like, is this working?
Only the pointer is working. So you have to click here.
It's not working.
The pointer only is working.
Okay, that's going to complicate my life. Okay. It's fine. So I'll talk broadly about ERM in the context of the higher education sector, and perhaps also in response to the question that says, how do you make risk exciting? Maybe I should actually not talk more about risks, but rather about opportunities. How should we, as risk practitioners, approach our subject matter as we service our clients?
It's good to have our sponsors also helping us with our IT project. Thank you very much.
We hope they are not going to bill us.
You can just carry on.
You can carry it. This will work.
Is it? And maybe let me talk to the first slide before, whilst they are still sorting it out. So Thabile started on a sporting note, and I thought let me do some copying and do exactly what she has done. One of the best coaches, he's based in Europe, but I think globally he's one of the best coaches. He's currently a coach for Manchester United, Jose Mourinho. He makes a statement talking to journalists, and he says, which was after a very successful season, it's not that I love this player or that player, but generally, I love those players that love to win. Not only the ones that love to win in the 90 minutes, but love to win every day, in every training session, in all of their lives. So question, as ERM practitioners, how can we support our clients, the institution, the organization, in such a way that that institution of ours, in my case, UNISA, that institution of ours can excel in every aspect of its activities. Whether you talk student support, whether you talk lecturing, whatever you're talking within or across the value chain, how can we support them in that way? So that's the quotation that Jose Mourinho once made. How can we get our institution to that level? So I'll take you through a few surveys And I am hoping as I go through these surveys, and it's focusing on the top 10 risks, I'm hoping that as I go through the surveys, you will see a common thread. And these surveys, by the way, are largely outside the higher education sector. But I'm hoping, because of the fact that they are outside, we can see the linkages with the higher education sector. And if there is a linkage at all, which I believe there is, then how best do we benchmark our institution? Rather than saying we're higher education, we're going to look just at our counterparts, rather than going outside the industry. So Aon conducted a survey in 2015, which is last year, and number one was damage to reputation. To what extent is that risk applicable to us? Then there was economic recovery, there's regulatory, which is also coming across in most of these surveys. And increasing competition, failure to attract skills or retain skills. This is the second half of that top 10. Failure to meet customer needs. Business interruption, which in my view talks to business continuity management, which Tabile was referring to, and which in most instances actually falls outside our forte as risk practitioners. However, we have to deliver on it. Then damage to property, that one is not coming across as frequently. And then in India this year, again they did a survey. And the top 10 talks to strikes, it talks to cyber security. Fraud and corruption is also coming up within the top 5. And then the second half, it's political governance, and there's intellectual property. There's also workplace violence, which talks to bullying, which talks to sexual harassment, and all those examples. Question: to what extent are we in the higher education sector affected by what is happening outside our industry? I guess also I'm trying to challenge us as risk practitioners that we need to read broadly in order to service our clients as effectively as we possibly can. We need, so you can have an academic qualification and be a doctor and be whatever. Are we reading broadly as internal audit practitioners, not internal audit practitioners, I'm now in the IIA. Are we reading broadly as ERM practitioners? Because if we don't, our clients are going to pick that up quite quickly. How you formulate your argument, how you formulate your statement, the client is going to pick it up quite quickly, and they will lose respect towards us. So there's another survey, which again was done this year, or the results came out this year. Regulatory changes are coming out strongly in these surveys. Economic conditions, that's a given. Talent management is coming out quite strongly. But on this one, organizational culture also came into play. Tabile spoke about risk culture, and in my view, there's a direct link, very close link, between risk culture and organizational culture. And question, as ERM practitioners, are we capable of supporting our clients in strengthening the organizational culture. Because as I say, my view, there's a direct link. You could say organizational culture is the basis or is the base for risk culture. Are we capable of supporting the institution effectively as far as the organizational culture is concerned? Yeah, it's working. And now let's come closer home. That was IMSA. So IMSA again came up with regulatory changes. That was number one. And IMSA, interestingly, this is the second time they run a survey, Tabile, am I right? Yes. Yeah. Yes, IMSA. Okay. I thought it was the second one. So corruption is number 4. What else is of interest? On reputational damage, the brand reputation is also coming out quite strongly. Okay, so I've given you these surveys. So what? As the ERM Directorate, as risk and compliance, we believe in the wisdom of naivety. So we are going to ask basic questions. Perhaps we will ask the same question again, all in the spirit of trying to collaboratively get into extraordinary solutions. The surveys are pointing this direction. So what? One of the studies that we came across as the ERM Directorate talks to the reluctance of higher education institutions to embrace the notion of business approach to running our activities. You know, there is this thing that says, don't talk to us about customers. Don't address us as clients. You know, we academics. This is an academic institution. There is that reluctance. And it's not just one study that has pointed to that. Question. As ERM practitioners, should we accept that position that's taken by the institutions? I believe we shouldn't. If we talk about, for instance, there's fees must fall, there's financial sustainability, and all of those things, as institutions, we've got to find a way of becoming more profitable. The economic climate is deteriorating, and that has been happening for quite some time. There is no strong indication that it is going to change. So we've got to find a way of deriving operational efficiencies. We've got to find a way of running the institution in a more efficient manner. So one of the basics we could try and adopt as an institution or as institutions is one that talks to branding. Because higher education institutions are not into this business approach thing, they are, again, not so much into the branding thing. So one study, as I've quoted, came out last year. There's a whole range of them that point towards that reluctance. In some instances, it is reluctance to embrace branding. In other instances, the higher education institution would embrace branding, but it's a difficult concept, they believe. Our view as ERM practitioners is that we need to use branding partly so as to attract more students, for instance. That very same study brought the dilemma. For instance, if we take UNISA, you've got UNISA as an institution, but you've got the SBL, which is our business school. So if you do embrace branding, how do you play it? Do you allow the SBL to higher profile its own brand that will compete with UNISA? Or you say, well, we've got UNISA as the mother body, that's the brand we're going to promote. It's one of the dilemmas that higher education institutions are facing. And I am saying, in light of fees must fall, in light of costs being difficult to contain, and in light of revenues getting more difficult to generate, our institutions are supposed to embrace branding, even with more vigor. So let's stay home with UNISA and look at the student profile or the trend in terms of students. We claim to be an African university. But outside South Africa, SADC, we only attract less than 8% of our student complement. As risk practitioners, we believe that if we can leverage branding much more, we could attract more than the 8%. Beyond the SADC, within the continent, we only have less than 1.5%. We need to attract more. We can't claim to be an African university when we only have less than 10% outside South Africa. It can't work. And if you go beyond the continent, which I have not shown here, it's less than 0.5. We can't. Question, from an ERM perspective, what is it that the institution can do? And yes, I must confess, we may not understand the activities, the intricacies of the higher education institution. However, if we work together, if we work jointly, enterprise risk management practitioners and the institution, we are likely to get to extraordinary solutions. So we talk about Odell. Odell, where are you? We talk about Odell. Again, in order for that to work, our view is that it's not just about technology capabilities. It's also about branding. Because remember, when you talk Odell, you're talking distance. And how do you, as an institution, attract students from afar? Branding becomes very important. So on the 25th, a few days ago, there was an article that talked to fees must fall, whether this should happen or it shouldn't, and if it does happen, what are the implications? And this was on Financial Mail. The one part I need us to focus on is the one that talks to private income. So perhaps we can't influence government subsidy, and there is pressure on student fees. But as an institution, as a sector, higher education sector, are we doing enough when it comes to generating more income from private sources? Again, I'll make my point. I'm not an expert in higher education, but I'm posing the question in the context or in the spirit of the wisdom of naivety. Let's look at a few examples. As I said, the economy is deteriorating, so we need to look at revenue options, revenue possibilities. Harvard University generated in the last year or so 400 million US dollars from potential donors. 400. You might say, well, Harvard is such a massive global brand. Let's look at another example. Stanford University in 2014, they generated 1 billion US dollars. And by the way, if we go back to Harvard, that was generated by a faculty. It's not the whole institution. Question: in this country, on this continent, are we doing enough to generate private funding? Are we doing enough? Or it's just a question of saying, well, the economy is difficult and potential donors are not going to be as responsive? I don't know. So, it was last year, if I'm not mistaken, when a whole range of higher education institutions on the continent met and had to learn from the US, to pick up some lessons from the US. How does the higher education sector in the US deal with declining revenues? And one of the things that came out, one of the critical points that came out, is that yes, as a continent, we may be having quite a number of challenges, most of which touch on our economic abilities, fund generation abilities. But what about Africans in the diaspora? Have we explored that enough? And that study, deliberations in that gathering, pointed to the need for us to explore this. And UNISA was part of those institutions. Have we done enough? Have we explored that avenue adequately? Another interesting point that came out of those deliberations across the Limpopo, Zimbabwe University generates, kind of caters for its operational costs from student fees, and the government is only taking care of staff salaries. So when, as a country, we talk about fees must fall, do we engage with our neighbors to say, but how come you're not talking fees must fall? You know, that's one of the questions we could ask. Again, I will make my point. I am not claiming to have the answers, but I'm saying we've got to keep reflecting. We can't say there is no other way. We've got to keep asking those questions. So I spoke earlier about operational efficiencies. So an institution would have a value chain. As UNISA, as other institutions within the higher education sector, how much time do we spend looking at our value chain, looking at the key activities within the value chain, looking at the processes, to say, is there room for improvement? That improvement could come in terms of turnaround times, and if you talk turnaround times, you're more likely to talk quality. That improvement could come in the form of financial savings. How much time do we spend on that? So some institutions outside the higher education sector would have what they call CEO awards at the end of the year. In this higher education sector, do we have that? Because if we do, then we're likely to have great ideas, extraordinary ideas, coming from small corners of our institution. Competition. For instance, if you talk UNISA, there is now University of Pretoria that's doing distance learning. I hope I'm right. There is other, particularly the global players in the higher education sector who are eating into our market share or who are threatening our market share. Are we ready for that? This is my last slide. So Tabile spoke about the risk register, for instance, how we should be approaching it. There is a difference between a book of 200 pages from the very beginning and a book of 200 pages that is the result of an original 800 pages. The 600 pages are there, only you do not see them. So if you want to do it pictorially, there's book 1 written from page 1 to page 200. There's book 2 written from page 1 to page 800. It gets edited and it comes back to 200. It comes down to 200 pages. Which of those two books is a better read? Anyone? Book 1 or book 2? Anyone for book 1? There's book 1. Anyone for book 2? There's book 2. We have a choice to make when we approach our clients, when we do those risk registers, whether we want to do a quick job that will equate to book 1, page 1 to page 200, or once we've got the risk register, we deliberate on it as a team, we deliberate with the client, we try to do quality checks on it so that at the end of the day, it comes down to 200 pages, but with better quality as a better rate. The same applies when we engage our clients on any matter pertaining to risk. We have a choice to simply steamroll them or allow them to steamroll us. That's one option. The other option is to get into vigorous debates with them. Thank you.